Can I get the speaker roles for Oct? Oh, you don't necessarily have to type it out. Like, if informing me verbally is fine as well.
We sent it into WSDC private chat, or should we just say it anyway?
Yeah, you can just say it because I don't think I'm there.
Okay. Oh, never mind. We'll send it in chat. It's better.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
No problem. Uh, right. Welcome to the Octofinals of WSDC Nationals 2024. My name is Christopher Lau. I'll be your chair for this round. I don't think I have any panelists. So congrats and good luck for both teams for making it this far. I'll be typing out timestamps in the chat, but both teams are encouraged to time themselves and their opponents, because I might miss timestamp or two. With that out of the way, on the motion, this House supports university student representative organizations taking stances on political issues, e.g. student councils organizing anti-government protests, having student representatives speak at political rallies, etc. I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to start off the debate. Here.
Wait, Chris, haven't started, right?
What?
I think we have a slight problem.
Why?
Can you go to room 5 and I take this room?
Limau. Okay, sure.
It was just a last minute conflict. Yeah.
Okay. Room 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yes, welcome back to the debate. Same rules will apply. It's just a different person judging. Okay, I invite the first proposition speaker.
Wait, do we need to resend the speaker roles to you?
No, it's all right.
Yeah, all right. So can we start now? Yeah, let me start. Yeah. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, please realize that in this generation, the youth has such a big impact on the society itself. So please, we beg you, please propose this motion. Now, on to the definition of the motion. Firstly, on stances on political issues. Stances on political issues basically means opinions and or protests on political matters. Now, are these political matters? What are these political issues? Political issues in this in the context of the debate basically mean political issues in general. Like for example, like any types of political issues such as like what the country's economy or Palestine versus Israel or whatever like that. Now, on to the second definition, which is the students' representative organizations. This basically means like an organization or group that consists of students as its main members, more or one students leading the organization as its representatives, or just like consists of students members generally. So like what does this motion looks like? This motion basically looks like like students representatives speaking up like maybe against Israel. Or like it looks like university students in Malaysia voting out against their like low internship pay. So basically the stakeholders that are present in this debate mostly are students or the youth, governments, and also like political parties. Now on to framing for this debate. Firstly, I just like to say that safety is something that is inevitable under both sides of the house. So we on the proposition side is we'll give you a counter model. Basically, our counter model is if these students want to like do protest themselves, they will get an agreement from the university that they are in to actually like just avoid direct repercussions from university. So this will give them extra
Point.
safety if they want to no thank you if they want to like actually do these protests. Now second is this that students representative organizations, please understand that that these people are willing to do these protests. They are willing to do the right thing. They themselves want to do these protests. Now thirdly, please understand panel that everything that involves protests is good, but we do understand that protests are something that is dangerous. So the burden on our side that we'll give to you is that we'll prove to you how on our side, the voice of the youth is heard, and secondly, youth value will increase in society. While on the opposition side, the burden to you is that they will need to prove how they can get effective protest on their side, and also secondly, they need to prove how the youths are not devalued in their house, in their side. So that's all for my setup. Let's move on. But before we move on to my arguments, any POIs? No?
Point. So earlier you talked about your counterfactual. Why do universities have an incentive to accept this?
Well, let's just say, please, okay. Please understand that people nowadays that if these universities actually allow these youths to speak up, then they will have an image, like they will have an image, especially in like use themselves, will actually like view these universities as as an organization that supports the youth. So this is basically like benefit their image altogether. So that is why we think these universities will actually like to agree to support these students to do protests and such. Now, on to my arguments. My argument is like under the key phrase of increasing youth value in society. So let me tell you why this argument exists. Please understand, panel, that in status quo, youth are viewed as like basically they're viewed as inferior as they are viewed as young. So like but the one who are doing these protests are the youth themselves, right? So this protest will basically affect the image altogether. People will realize that these students can actually be mature enough to understand political issues. So if people realize this, realize this, it will increase use value in society. So like basically how does this argument correlate with the motion? Like I said before, this will like increase the image of like youth maturity in the society as a whole. So it's like because like these students themselves like will protest about obviously about something good. So this will all in all affect the image and increase the value. So basically two layers to my argument. Firstly is the change in norms itself. So if these students try to do this protest, for example, like they go to in their graduation ceremony, they go up to the stage, they bring like a Palestine flag, and then they do a speech about Palestine. That's basically the protest that is basically like this representing like a protest or like a section where they are speaking up in terms of political issues. So basically, like, people will realize youth aren't just kids. They aren't just like young people like to study or whatever. Basically, if more students try to speak up on political issues, people like and they realize that the influence that they have, people will actually like listen to their opinion more as they like realize that youth are actually mature enough to speak up about political issues. So basically, like youth will be viewed as more significant in political matters and such. Now, on to the second layer. But before, you know, I said early, actually, I need POIs. No, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So on to the second layer. Basically, if these students, if more students try to speak out on political issues, basically this will affect. This will bring to a more stronger political stance in youth. Why do I say this? Well, because please understand, panel, that youth these days have a very strong influence. They have a very strong voice, a very like present voice. So if they talk about political issues, people will listen. People will listen to them, right? But the people who are more likely to actually like listen to them are the youth themselves. So basically, if they record like a university student doing protest on the side, these like people, the kids, maybe like teenagers in social media will view them as like people who are brave, people who are willing to speak up for like dangerous political issues, and these like people on social the youth on social media will actually like, be more motivated to like involve themselves in political matters. So basically, this will actually like raise a better political stand in youth, and it basically lead to a more a better society all in all. So basically, the impacts of my argument here is that one, it will lead to a like more mature view of the youth themselves, as they will not be devalued as much, and they will be viewed as significant in political matters. And secondly, it will raise a better political stand and a stronger like patriotism inside of youth themselves to actually like raise a better future generation. And for that, I've never been prouder to propose.
Thank you to the first proposition speaker for their speech, and now I invite the first opposition speaker.
Hello, am I audible and am I visible?
Yes, you are.
Wonderful. Okay, yeah. Prefer pronunciation as the verbal POIs, please. I'm Ray and Core. I'm LO, but just refer to me as first stop or something like that. That's more than enough. Highly recommend POIing because yeah, I love taking POIs. And before I start, it's great to be here. Great to debate with you guys. And shout out to my teammates. Okay, yeah, let's just start. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Structural oppression can never be changed by structural means. A student under the structured society can never escape it without external structures, without suffering immense harm under their own welfare. Proud to oppose. But the first thing that I want to do is just 2 responses. The first thing is towards side government. One structural note. They don't actually give us any characterization. They tell us this vague idea of like, oh, organization means student event X committee, executive committee, or like student representation speaking up for like political issues. Yeah, I think that was very clear from the get-go. I'll recharacterize later, but I think the second problem is the counterfactual. They tell us that they're going to somehow magically manifest agreement from the university. I just point out how ridiculous this is, right? Because the means in which they tell us is that society is getting more progressive. The first question we need to ask is just what is the greatest incentive and whether this societal progression is the only opinion out there, in which it isn't. We tell you that societal pressure is 2 sides of a coin. You have the liberals on one side and you have the conservatives on the other. Both of them are going to ostracize you if you come out for the other. If you make a liberal stance, the conservatives are going to come and get you. If you make a conservative stance, the liberals are going to come out and ostracize you, right? And this sort of societal pressure means that staying neutral is the best incentive for universities to not get ostracized from both sides and get an audience attention. The second incentive as to why this is not the case is just that universities get massive amounts in grants and funds from the government. And we think that that incentive means that they're likely to maintain some sort of opinion, or at least make sure that they don't come across as anti-government or like politics, right? Because we think that that only ends up with them risking their funds and grants. It is completely not in their incentive. So the counterfactual is out of the bloody roof. Next thing is just that they tell us that if these young people protest, it will affect their image. realize there's no mechanism to this, it magically appears. But I'll do the extra work to tell you why this is not the case. The premise to why students are not seen as young and naive is just because there's an age gap, right? But we think that here, polarizations actually occur if you protest because people who already think youth are naive will only strengthen their stance if the youth do something as severe as a protest. And we think that this actually worsens the problem on their side, where we then flip the problem towards their case. Okay, their case is completely fallen. Let's now deal with the characterization. I think firstly, it's just what university students look like. And we think that these people, they don't necessarily want to be a part of political issues. Their main incentive is about furthering their unique career to the best possible extent and don't necessarily join youth movements that much, but those who do on either side. Second thing is just about student representative organization. We think that these student councils have significant amounts of power over student bodies as they are voted into power, but also they have like a significant strength over the student base, right? And what type of policies or what type of campus that they live on, which means that they also handle events and communicate issues to university management. We think that thirdly, the stances of issues within these individuals are uncertain. What I mean by this is just that stances here can be both conservative or liberal. It's not always good or bad stances. It's hard to prove the likelihood that these are going to be like, there's more going to be good stances than bad ones, especially if you see the amount of conservative states in the US. You don't know if they're going to vote for like Harris or Trump, right? Second thing is just on our counterfactual. We want status quo. We think there's more than enough political movements if students want to join them already. If students can opt into them, we think that that's more than enough. They get choice on their side. This is more than enough for progression. They should get the choice. And if they want to advocate for political change, we think that that's up to them. Things like Undi 18 exists. We think that Bangladesh is not necessarily a student thing then, just as an example, but it was a collective movement from the youth. That sort of thing is what we want. And we think that we believe that these are already enough and it's unnecessary to let student representatives do the extra work. Gov comparative here. We think that government needs to defend students being at risk by doing this. And many students end up getting into violence, right? The examples are Hong Kong protests. It resulted in a lot of violence. Students were literally locked up. The leaders of these student movement had to flee the country. We think that then this debate is not about people who join movements anyway. This debate is about people who are not in movements and don't want to join. Next thing that they need to defend is that change may not occur. Government needs to defend it well that not everyone may be liberal. There are conservative students there are conservative students out there too. And we think that if this is uncertain, they may be left or right. The harm manifests even worse because they now have to defend the people who are co-opted into such. That leads me to my argument before that POI.
Understand that political issues does not only include conservative and liberals. Political issues, conservatives and liberals can still agree on one political issue.
If there was a political issue, then it most of the time happens because of discourse between the left and the right and what sort of process they should take. I don't understand the POI, but thanks for it anyway. Okay, the argument. We want more student welfare. The problem is twofold, right? Firstly, students get co-opted into supporting particular belief. 3 reasons why this is the case. University representatives have large power student base. Representatives create a university culture over their stances due to the immense amount of power, and the students have an incentive to glean maximum benefits and minimize ostracization for best interest in universities. We think then the skill is very high because student organization power creates trends and cultures in universities that create such necessities for students and creates benefits for them if they opt into such a culture. Second thing is just that students are structurally oppressed. We think there's 4 reasons why this is the case. Politicians cater to pre-existing old people to get votes and they could not care for the students who don't really vote that much. Universities have an incentive to claim maximum benefits from grants and funds from government and can't risk creating a bad image. They have contracts that prevent students from doing so already in the terms and conditions. Thirdly, society does not view students as a valuable group because they don't contribute to society in terms of work. They have a cultural age gap and oftentimes abstain from voting. Fourthly, we think there are structures called illegal to talk about politics in educational sites. All of this points to both legal and social structures that will eventually oppress students if they attempt to create such structural change. The scale is very high because universities have full control over student contracts and students. We think that all of these leads to societal expectations and pressures that lock students in. The harm then is threefold. It's not sustainable. Students end up being prosecuted or to lose their reputation. They no longer have the propensity to buy in. Secondly, student welfare is harmed. There's a large-scale student oppression from every societal and legal structure possible. Thirdly, minority view students are co-opted into a belief that they don't believe. This is a principal harm that is not justified and very unethical. They must trade this off. We think that solution is simple. Two layers, firstly, on more choice. Two reasons why this is the case. We think that firstly, we have pre-existing structures to already combat government problems, things like movements, etc., etc. We don't want, and secondly, it's just that we don't want to co-opt students into joining like a particular student, right? A particular stance, because we get a politics-free university culture in the absence of a large body opting for this and the pre-existing structures. Secondly, more freedom of the self. Note here that there are people who don't come out on issues because they are minorities in conservative groups or conservative in liberal groups. They end up getting social ostracization if they make an opinion on their own identity. We think that here we cannot have a dominant opinion, and not having a dominant opinion to be ostracized by in the lack of such a culture is something that benefits these people on their own self-identity. But we also think that the lack of immense ostracization to come out on a particular opinion allows them to at least maintain some semblance of validation towards their own identity, to believe that they are like a decent person. And we think the impact is simple. We get more student welfare at the end of the day by less co-opting them and students not feeling pressured. And we think that we also protect the safety of students by not risking themselves to go to jail and not stirring up violence on the streets. The second thing is just better change. We think if students are prosecuted, they can still, like, if students are not prosecuted, they can still join like external political movements that are more sustainable if they want to, right? But if they're, and like this essentially means that student reputations stay intact because they're not seen as students, they're seen as part of a movement. But if you realize that they're seen as students and they're seen as young and naive, you're going to end up with a big problem of precisely the flip that I gave you, right? So we think that then the comparative under Gov is that they have a lesser propensity for change where we flip this, because students have a higher likelihood of being prosecuted, where their counterfactual is completely unsustainable and not standing at the end of the day. For all of these reasons, proud to oppose.
I thank the first opposition speaker. I now invite the second proposition speaker.
A minute here. Hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Right, thanks. Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think opposition is neglecting our counterfactual because they are scared that our counterfactual will actually work. Before substantive and issues, onto several responses towards the problematic ideas that the other side of the house responded to us. First, will our counterfactual would actually work? Our counterfactual is basically like doing some sort of agreement with a university and the student representative of a specific organization to protest against certain political issues. We tell you why. Number one, if the universities don't agree, it's okay. The students can still voice out their voices. The main reason why we wanted to do this agreement in the first place is to ensure that we have a safety net in between the universities and the students itself, in order to avoid direct repercussions given from the university to the student. Number two is that we tell you that if these universities were to accept that like sort of agreement, we tell you that number one, these universities' image will be highly taken upon society, because society view these universities as somewhat a university that have students who are willing to voice out their voices to society, have students who who are not really scared to voice out their opinions out to society, something that we think is mutually exclusive under our side of the house. Secondly, we think that secondly, what are political issues? Because we think that the opposition is being very narrow-minded on political issues involving only two liberal and conservative part. But basically, political issues are large. We believe that liberal and conservatives are sort of like the thing and model in political issues. But the thing is, political issues also involve conflicts and stuff like the Israel and Palestine issue, where literally humanity exists in that sense itself. The question of the debate then comes is that, but basically, the other side of the house told you, by having liberal and conservative students inside one university, is a bad thing. Here's the flip. Why having two liberal and conservative opinion inside universities is actually a good thing. We tell you that under our side of the house, we allow discussions to happen in between students in universities. In that sense itself, we allow youth's value to increase in society because people actually view youth as someone who is willing to speak out to society in comparison towards the other side of the house, where status quo, youth are not willing to speak out, where youth are scared to speak out, where youth don't want to voice out their opinions because their opinions do not matter by on the eyes of society itself. We tell you that youth's own value is degraded under the other side of the house. Understand, panels, that even though there's two liberal and conservatives, at the very best case, at the very worst case, at least we allow discussions to happen. At least we allow youth to like voice out their opinion and like involved in certain political issues, which is quite important because they are youths, they are important in democracy. Lastly, will safety of student under our side of the house be safe? Will safety of student under our side of the house be like deteriorated and whatnot? We tell you that number one is the student's choice itself in order to voice out their opinions to society. The main reason why we support it because
Point.
we wanted to increase the youth value in society. At the same time, we want to empower youth's voice in society. Now, number one, in that sense itself, we tell you that the youth themselves agree themselves to do it. And number two, based on our counterfactual, we tell you that the safety of these youths would be like sort of like safe. Before I move on towards substantive, sure, POI.
Was Undi 18 a youth movement or a student representative organization?
This is a student representative organization. The main reason why we support a student representative organization is because we want to empower youth voices from all around the globe to speak out to society. That's one. And number two is we want to allow voices of youth to actually be heard in society, unlike the other of the house, where youth are basically like being put to the corner of the room crying because of the fact that these youth are not heard at all. Now, onto our substantive then, which is on creating an echo chamber where we empower all youth to voice out their opinion. Several things. Number one, several contextualization. We think opposition needs to understand status quo. Status quo is basically youth voices in society is undervalued and undermined because they are too afraid to speak up, and even when they speak up, their voices would not be heard because society does not care about their existence and opinions because not each and every single youth is picking up. Only one or two, which is not really effective in the first place. Second, why is youth voices important? We outline two main things here. A, youth are the best representative of young generations to speak up to society. That is to say that youth themselves are at a transitioning age of a teenager and a grown man. In that sense itself, we tell you that youth are like sort of have reached the level of maturity the best in comparison towards teenagers and whatnot. In that sense itself, we tell you that youth voices will be effective enough for society to accept. But B, and most importantly, we tell you that youth voices allow democracy to happen because when you have each ladder in society voices to be heard, we tell you that democracy will only exist under our side of the house because we tell you that in certain like in certain governments where you only like put and limit the age gap of like opinions only towards like the higher towards the middle age and whatnot, we tell you that democracy wouldn't really exist because the youth voices are not valued. Before I move on towards third, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
If these students are afraid to speak out, why would these student representatives even exist in the first place? And would
Number one, we think that isn't the burden of our side to prove because literally we are able to fiat that the student representative is able to exist in order for this debate to even progress. The main reason why we wanted to support this student representative existing is because of the fact that we want, again, the youth value to increase, and number two, we wanted the youth voices to actually be heard for society. Both of these things are mutually exclusive under our side of the house. Third, let's do some framing. Third, based on what I've stated earlier, we tell you that we allow and create an echo chamber where more youths are encouraged to voice out their opinion willingly in society. Just like I stated earlier, status quo is harmful for youths because their opinions do not matter because only one or two speak up in society. In that sense itself, two things that we're able to achieve. Number one, we will increase youth values in society. Youth value in society would increase, and number two, all youths are willing to connect with each other, and that wall of being afraid to speak up is faded away only under our side of the house. Fourthly, and most importantly, is that we we sort of remove the stigmatization of youth being immature in society. Two things to highlight here. Number one is that we allow democracy to happen, and number two, we allow for more diverse discussion inside governments and whatnot. Because one society would not only be limited towards hearing people towards hearing like political issues with people under the age of like 40 and above. We tell you that we allow more diverse discussions. We tell you that we allow youth voice to be heard. We tell you that we allow the young generation's voice to be heard, because young generation's voice are extremely important. We tell you that the only person that is like sort of acceptable to voice out their opinions and mature enough are youth. That's why we allow youth representative to exist in status quo. Understand that if the whole case comes from opposition is trying to push that they are liberal and conservatives, and they won't really and these youths won't really unite with each other, we tell you at the very worst case we allow discussions to happen. At the very worst case, our youths are willing to speak up to society. At the very worst case, our youths are actually inside of a democratic country. For all those reasons, incredibly proud to oppose.
Thank you to the second proposition speaker. I invite the second opposition speaker. Hello.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Um, no, okay. Okay. I know. Yeah. Okay. Okay, sorry. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We see that today's side government lives in a fantasy world where politicians have the quote-unquote incentive to listen to them over adults or other protesters, right? I don't see how their world is feasible. Two things I'll be doing in my speech. First of all, some responses, and secondly, engaging with their best case. First, to responding to the LO's ridiculous model on getting agreement from universities. Though my first speaker has already responded to this, I'll continue by talking about how contradictory they were, okay? First of all, they're contingent on the youth having a big amount of influence for the university to even agree to them having protests in the first place, right? This is contradictory to the fact that your goal is to increase youth value. If you want to increase youth value, but somehow they already have enough value to get these universities in agreement, then I don't understand why you want to increase their value to such an extent, right? It doesn't make sense. It's such an idealistic world, and they're contradictory, okay? Secondly, you're saying that somehow all these students, all these university students within that university are 100% willing and voluntarily participating in these protests, okay? What do they assume? They assume that all students within that university are actually interested in the world of politics. And secondly, they assume that all these students have the same stance as the student body representative, when in actuality, they're not, right? The student body representative may take on a political stance which is more conservative. You may support Trump, right? But in actuality, you support Kamala Harris, right? This just goes to show how people have differing opinions, and that the student body president cannot encompass everyone's political sense. Hence why this is not true. And thirdly, why in actuality it is that side government is actually coercing these students to join their political protests, right? First of all, it's because these student body presidents, they hold a certain level of power over these students, right? And when they see and influence other people to join their protests, it causes a peer pressure and bandwagon effect. Hence, when I am supporting, like for example, Kamala Harris, like every one of my friends and every single person I know, and even the student body representative are supporting Donald Trump, how am I exactly going to go against them, right? How exactly am I going to have my opinion heard? How exactly am I going to go against this big wave of people, right? Hence why people are not actually able to properly protest on your side. And even if these students are willing to do these protests, we say that those who are willing already join youth movements that exist within the status quo, that exist and are held by external organizations, right? And we say that that in of itself is already enough protesting. You don't need to involve random innocent students who don't align with your political stance or who don't even want to be involved in the world of politics. Okay, moving on. Let's look at their main argument. Their main argument is that by increasing youth value, they increase, somehow their image increases, people see the youth as more mature and leads to a better society overall. But let's first point out the lack of analysis they prove, right? How does that lead to the youth actually, their value being increased? How do they actually view the youth as more mature through these protests, right? I want to question their feasibility. Because their argument is contingent on people thinking the youth as mature, I'll disprove this. First of all, it's because in the status quo, a lot of these students have already faced legal repercussions for protesting, right? They have already been shut down by the university. Like for example, Columbia and Harvard, they have already been put down for protesting. They have already been put down for this. So hence why this image that has already been portrayed in the status quo will further deem them as like bad and further deem them as just immature little kids acting out or voicing out, right? This just shows the university's power over them. Hence why it is so harmful for these students, because it just makes the youth seem more immature and easily shut down, right? And secondly, protests and anti-government rallies are overall seen in a negative light because they often lead to violence, right? I don't understand why protesting suddenly leads to people thinking of the youth as quote unquote mature, when the fact that they're young is the reason why they think they're immature, right? That doesn't change the fact that people will still think of them as young and inexperienced. And secondly, let me question their impact on, will they actually get a better society, right? They never prove the incentive of politicians or universities to actually buy whatever the youth has said, right? There are plenty of external protests. There are plenty of protests held by working people, held by adults, held by external organizations. Why would they hear the youth over these other organizations or other protests that are happening, right? That are filled with a lot of like influential people, right? Do you see the harm? Note that they say that the youth has quote unquote less power, insinuating that adults have more power, right? So if that is the case, then why would they suddenly listen to these young people? Like, why would they suddenly listen to the youth and suddenly change their entire political stand, and suddenly change the whole entire government scene, right? But even if you buy that people are going to see them as mature, we still win, because the fact that the ideals they're fighting on are not necessarily good or bad. The fact that the ideals and stances they take may be conservative or liberal, we say that in of itself is a very large harm that they have yet to be able to defend, because they are fighting, because side government has to disprove a stance that could actually be further harmful and can actually further perpetuate for example conservative ideals in that area, right? That harm in of itself far outweighs the quote unquote benefit of seeing the youth as mature. Okay. Next, they talk about how having different ideals is a good thing, right? And how discourse within the university is a good thing. But first, let's evaluate why these students pay thousands and thousands of money, like dollars and all their money to just go to university. They want to study. The goal of going to university is to study. If you want to deal with politics, do so after you leave university, right? People can still protest after they leave university, right? But once you have discourse within university, why is this bad? First of all, because it leads to a lot of fights, tension, and a lot of and it oppresses like a lot of these minority ideals that people have, and also discourages them from studying, right? When people are only focused on having their anti-government rallies, when they're only focusing on rallying and politics, all these etc. stuff, it can discourage them from their studies. And secondly, people who have differing ideals, of course it will lead to fights, right? If I don't agree on something, it will lead to a lot of tension and just an overall unsafe environment within that university where people are constantly fighting one another. And secondly, because you're on their side, they're not necessarily representing different ideals, right? You have to know this, because the student body president, the student council is the one holding it. Not necessarily is it representing of everyone's ideals. And secondly, they say that at the very least, they're able to allow the youths to have their voice out, right? But only but you're not actually allowing the youth to voice out their stance, because only the student body is the one deciding on their stance. Only a small group of people, only a small student representative is deciding on their stance, right? How does that truly encompass everyone, or how does that truly allow everyone's voice to come out, okay? So in their best case, the youth are heard, but we say that currently in the status quo, their voice is already heard on social, like their voice is already quite heard on social media, and that structure in of itself is already enough, and you don't need these universities as an external because it causes much more harm than good. Proud to oppose.
Thank you to the second opposition speaker. I now invite the third proposition speaker.
Am I audible from here?
Yes, you are.
All right. Yeah, pure eyes verbally. Speech in 3, 2, 1. I think the whole problem of opposition side here is how they did not even follow what government side said. We gave definitions, we gave counter models, they just said no and moved on with their arguments. That's the whole problem on the other side of the house. They are moving towards a parallel debate where they are debating on their own arguments and rebuttals to their own arguments that they made by themselves. In that sense, we tell you that all of the arguments that we say, all of the harms that they say that exist on the other side of the house does not really materialize on our side of the house. Onto the cardinal sins that opposition has committed. First, they say that it's not the students' choice to protest. We tell you, number one, this is highly illogical because we told you the principle is simple. People or students who opt into protest do it because they want to. It's important also to note, panels, that the job on government side here is not to justify forcing students to opt into protest. It's to support students opting or standing up for themselves when they protest for something that they want to. Second, notice panels, how opposition side, they rejected our model on how you're going to get agreement from universities because they are so scared of it, because their whole argument is highly contingent upon the fact that universities are going to punish all of the students for the protests that they have done. They tell you that this is contradictory because on our side of the house, we told you that university student representative organizations already have influence. Why do you need more influence? I think, in my person, it is highly illogical for you to say, why do you actually need more influence? On your side of the house, you need to understand what exactly is the point of protest or you having a political stance in that first place. It's not just for you to gain influence, it's for you to gain influence until that influence is big enough until you make a change. The change is what you want and the change is what doesn't exist on side opposition. It is only mutually exclusive on our side of the house, regardless if the harms happen. Onto the first issue then, which is how they assume that all political issues are going to be conservative or liberals. Opposition told you a narrow definition again, where political issues only includes conservatives and liberals. We tell you no, political issues is general. We gave this in our definition. Again, they rejected our definition, basically not really abiding towards the laws of debate, where you need to abide by the definition what the government gave. What we said was that it involves governmental issues and public affairs also. We told you on Gov by first speech that this includes issues like Palestine and Israel. This includes the intern bukan buruh movement by Malaysia's university students. It's important to note again, panels, there still exists a lot of political issues in which conservatives and liberals can still agree on. It's also important to note, panels, that on government side, we are the House. Opposition cannot reject our definition without a clear reasoning. On the other side of the House, they rejected our definition and gave a very narrow definition and debated most of their arguments based off that. I'll take a point before second issue.
Do the left and right agree on things like minimum wage?
Repeat.
Do the left and the right agree on things like minimum wage?
Of course, I did not tell you that all political issues is both sides going to agree on. I just told you that there exists a lot of political issues that both sides can agree on. Not everything, or not every political issue, conservatives and liberals can agree on. Not every political issue everyone can agree on. This leads to their case on how they say it's going to lead to a bad ecosystem in the university, but that will be answered in my fourth issue. On to second issue is on how they said that youths are immature, youths are seen as immature in status quo. Opposition tells you that everyone thinks like this. Everyone thinks that all youths, that all university students are immature. We tell you no, because by first speech, we already told you that the reason why this will be effective is because of the fact these are youth, and we make up the majority of country, and we make up the future of our country. In that sense, the influence that we have towards youth in other universities, the influence that youth has towards all of the teenagers that exist in the country is good. The other side cannot assume that everyone thinks youth are immature. We tell you that even if they win the clash, that old people or the conservative or the elder people in the country think that youths are immature. We tell you that is the whole issue that we're pushing on today's debate, because of the fact that youths are discriminated, that the youth voices are pushed down by old people, that the youth voices are pushed down by conservative views, and all of their views that they want to voice out cannot be voiced out because of the fact that on your side of the house, old people just voice them down. On to the third issue is how on the point on how they said that on our side of the house, even if the bad happens, politicians will not listen because of the fact that youths are immature. We tell you, this is exactly the issue that we are trying to tackle. Because of the fact that politicians don't listen, that old politicians don't listen to youth in the first place, is the main reason why we want to push for protests. It's the main reason why we want to support them to push for protests. It's the main reason why we want them to gain more influence towards the country, where the politicians, when we gain enough influence, will see that these people wants a change in order to get a betterment for themselves. Because of the fact that in status quo on your side of the house, politicians don't listen to this youth. It's exactly exactly the problem that we're trying to tackle, that we're tackling on proposition. On to fourth issue, which is the biggest issue on the other side of the house. I'll take a last point.
Would you risk these students being prosecuted and getting put in jail just to get a voice?
Okay, that point. We already counted that in our model when we said that we're going to get an agreement from university. But even if panel doesn't buy that, we tell you that even if in our worst case scenario that some students are going to get prosecuted, are going to get jail time, we tell you even if that happens, I'm going to give an example. Adam Adli, which is a university in UiTM, was protesting for his own right, was protesting for the people in UiTM. Even if he got jailed after that, after he got out of jail, people still voted for him to be the YB of Malacca. I see no harm in that because it shows that the people actually support Adam Adli. In that sense, even if the worst case happens that the students get prosecuted, change still happens. Change still happens, and change is what we want as status quo. On your side of the house, change doesn't happen. That's the whole issue on your side of the house. On to the fourth issue, which is how they elaborated on the harms if we were to support the motion. Basically, they say that the ecosystem of universities will be political because all students have different political views, and it will alienate certain students from certain students. We tell you again, in the motion, it doesn't mean that we force all students in university to opt into politics. We're just saying that if certain university students representative organizations wants to do protest, wants to take a stance on political issues, we will support them. These certain students who want to do this, we will support them. We are not forcing every student to opt into political issues. We tell you that if in this certain university there exists one student council, the one university student representative organization who wants to opt into protest, it doesn't mean that everyone will hate them just because they are doing that. Even if they have opposing views, it doesn't mean that everyone in the university will look them as something that is bad. Because we tell you again, a principle in today's debate is that protest happens, social movement happens, it happens for good. It happens for something that is better for them. Even if there exist some individuals who have opposing views, it doesn't mean that we force them to attack these people. It doesn't mean that we force them to be political. It doesn't mean that we force all students in university to be political. That's the whole issue on your side of the house, where you assume every harm is going to materialize on our side. We tell you again, panels, that only mutual exclusive on our side of the house, that change happens, that the voices of the youth are heard.
Thank you to the third proposition speaker. I now invite the third opposition speaker.
Hello, am I visible and audible?
Yes, you are.
Here.
Okay. Oh wait, hold on. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The very start government presented us a counterfactual that we have already disproved time and time again, right? They say that they want to get an agreement for the university first before they proceed with the student council representing on talking about politics, right? However, we have told you that this does not fit the incentives of the universities, right? And my PM has told you that the university's incentive is to remain neutral because they want to appeal to society. They don't want to be posed by either the conservative or liberal sides. They want to just stay neutral and appeal to the majority, right? We tell you that there are many examples of this in the status quo already. This looks like Harvard kicking out 7 students for advocating for Palestinians, right? It's already happening in the status quo. Therefore, we just cannot buy this counterfactual, right? But note that their entire case is also contingent on this counterfactual actually working, right? The fact that we've already taken it down within all 3 speeches of my side, it means that their whole case just does not work at all, right? I think we've already won this debate by the moment we've taken down their counterfactual, right? But sure, even if we buy this counterfactual, we tell you the extent in which universities will actually agree is small, because your case is also contingent on universities agreeing, right? So if universities don't even agree, then the scale of impact that you're trying to push cannot even manifest, and it will only manifest in the absolute minimum, right? So only very little student representatives will actually be able to exist. In your case, the impacts that you're pushing for just cannot work, right? Moving on into my responses, I have 2 main responses. Firstly, they claim that students will opt in if they want to, and it's their own choice, right? We tell you that this claim just completely unengages with our PM's case. We tell you that in the status quo right now, not every youth wants to be involved in politics, right? But on your side of the house, when you have a student council representing everyone, you're stirring discourse, you're going to rallies and whatnot, you're essentially pressuring everyone in the university to join you, right? Because of peer pressure, because of the bandwagon effect. I think we've already talked about that a lot, right? We tell you when you do this, you're essentially coercing students, and even if they don't agree with the political stance that the student council is fighting for, we tell you that these students who did not care about politics at first are swayed into believing something that they weren't really that passionate in anyways, and you're basically swaying other people's ideals, and we think that this is just coercion, this is just co-opting people into something that they're not, right? But we also tell you that this claim is extremely contradictory and also shoots themselves in the foot, right? Because if you claim that it's a choice, if you claim that opting into this is a choice, then you're not going to get enough buy-in, you're not able to get enough capital, not enough students are going to actually willingly join, right? If you don't have enough people to join, then how are you going to opt for it? How are you going to get change? How are you going to make any sort of like change and discourse in society, right? I think there's a very big loophole in your case. And before I continue, yes, POI.
Understand that this debate does not only involve under one university. The fact that this debate involves millions and millions of university having at least one single student representative means that we're able to like sort of provide change towards society.
Yeah, I've already told you that firstly, your counterfactual doesn't work, right? A lot of universities, they don't have this incentive to agree with you anyway. So a lot of these student bodies cannot even exist in the first place. But secondly, we tell you that a lot of these universities, they are different, right? And each student council, they'll have different political stances as well, so everything is going to be different, and they cannot represent an entire student body, an entire demographic of young people, right? Because everyone has different opinions, and that's our point. Okay, my next response is how they claim that political issues isn't about left or right. We don't think that this claim is very impactful, because whether or not it's about left or right, if it's about like Palestine or Israel, it's about wars or whatever, I don't think that's the point. At the end of the day, our point is, as long as you have a student body speaking on a political issue, there will always be people agreeing and disagreeing with that issue, and that in itself will lead to harm. And I'll explain that further in my classes. Moving on into my classes, right? Firstly, on which side can actually better empower the youth voices and well-being, right? On government, they tell us that they want to increase youth value in society, but on opposition, we tell you there are many pre-existing structures that already exist, right? And that's so let's analyze this first. So on side government, let's talk about how these youths are viewed in status quo, right? We tell you that the youth are viewed as young and naive, and they're already very oppressed because politicians would much rather cater to the older people, to the adults, because this voting, like these adults, they are like much richer. They have more like they have more things that politicians need to cater to, right? So we tell you, if students speak on politics, what's going to happen? We tell you that these student stances, it's uncertain, right? Because government has yet to tell us that like what these stances are going to about. We tell you that you'll never guarantee that if the stances are going to be left or right, if it's going to be about conservative, or liberal, if it's going to be pushing for extreme stuff, no thank you. So either way, whatever you push for, it's going to be a harm, right? Because if you talk about very liberal ideas, if you're pushing for things like this, we tell you you're only going to reinforce the narrative that students are very wild, they're very naive, because like when you push for liberal ideals, you're going against your social norms, are going against the government, you're going against these conservative adults, right? But comparatively, if these student bodies, they push for conservative ideals, then you further push on oppressive and radical ideals, you're just going to degrade the entire society. You're going to brainwash students into being conservative, having these conservative ideals. And so we tell you, either way, whatever stance you take, it's going to be harm, either towards the society or towards the student itself, right? Therefore, whatever change you're pushing for just does not work. And also, no, they don't provide enough process analysis for us to actually buy it, right? But on opposition, we tell you that we would much rather allow students to join external, no thank you, external political movements. And why is this much better than whatever they're saying, right? We tell you that external movements are led by adults, not students. If these students join willingly, then they're painted as like a normal, usual political movement, and not their image is not one that is led by a student, right? And this is much better because it's a better safety net, because when other adults are involved, these adults have much more social status than these students. So the government is less likely to actually like shut them down. And even if they do try to shut them down, these students are still better protected because there are adults involved within this external movement that is not led by a student. Therefore, we tell you our counterfactual is much more beneficial and we better empower youth. But lastly, on the clash of safety, right? On government, they tell us because of their counterfactual, they can protect these youth. But on our side, we just tell you this is not true, right? We tell you they've already taken down their counterfactual, but let's be charitable and buy it, right? So what happens if these students actually lead the political movements? We tell you this will lead to legal repercussions, because in status quo in Malaysia, in like schools, you cannot even talk about politics. Teachers are refrained from talking about politics in schools, right? We tell you there are examples like in Hong Kong when students were trying to and protest, we tell you that there were literal children, kids, 17, 18 years old, being prosecuted and put in jail, right? There were fights on the streets. So are basically risking, these students are risking their entire academic careers. If they're prosecuted, it will literally ruin their future because they're gonna have a criminal record, right? We tell you if side government doesn't prove why this risk of is worth trading off for some degree of discourse, I cannot buy their case. But lastly, on opposition, we tell you that we're much safer because when there are no student-led movements, there are less violent. Students are not directly being targeted by law enforcement, and students can study in peace. And it's obvious that we are the ones who better protect the safety of these children. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you to the third opposition speaker. I now invite the opposition reply speaker.
Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible and
Yes.
visible? That is great. That was a great debate, guys. Thanks a lot. Okay, just give me a quick second to set up my timer because I switched the wrong thing. Third negative, no, negative reply. No matter. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. This is a schools debate with youth talking about youth problems, about not being able to talk about youth problems. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a parliamentary debate with a proposition and opposition about a political issue, without about the lack of the left and right, prop and op. Again, absolutely ridiculous. This is a discussion style debate about discussion and engagement without engagement. Absolutely ridiculous. This is a trade-off necessary debate about weighing the trade-off between the risk of safety and principal harm with no trade-off. Okay, maybe this one's not so ridiculous because it's clear that prop has traded off the win. Let's structure this speech by the flaws of prop. Firstly, they're questionable counterfactual. They're counterfactual about uni agreement because, there's this trend of progressivity in society and student power. It's really funny because they never engaged at the very start of my speech about why these incentives are not as great as the incentives to appeal towards society, the two incentives that we give you already, and also just the legal problem with it and the how the unis have over students in the contracts, right? So reasonably, can we buy it? No, for two reasons. Firstly, I'm broke in money, but they're more broke on likelihood analysis. And secondly, the question of student power versus student unit, versus university incentive to expand and appeal to society is one that we win. If you really want the analysis to this, sure, I'll give it to you. The reason why university incentive is stronger than student power is because student power is already negligible by their own characterization. If they tell you that, hey, students in status quo are seen as naive, then yeah, universities aren't going to buy that students have power. If they have power over their financial, expansionist ideas, then we tell you that that's not the case as well. Because guess what? There are always other students on the waitlist who want to also join the university who are willing to pay money. And if that's the case, then why on earth do they have an incentive to appeal to these student groups anyway, when they're already so, intertwined and have so many other student groups that they could appeal with? So yeah, funny, right? Second thing is the magical analysis that they give us. Nothing in analysis. Need I say more? Oh wait, I do. That's called analysis. I'll analyze that case for you. Their pushes were about student opinion and student representative organizations that create that student opinion, right? Let's say the reason why this creates buy-in is because student representative organization represent large unis and create the perception of large-scale movements. And secondly, that students are empowered by the student representative organizations and are likely to buy in because of the incentive to be progressive. Let me take this straight down. First thing they told us was students are scared because they are oppressed. If they are oppressed, in what world are they going to come out with their opinion? Why is this tipping point? But secondly, it's just a question that needs to be asked. Whether student representatives are empowering or just bandwagoning people. There's nothing empowering about some student organization because there's nothing intrinsically rhetorical about it other than requirement for power or something like that, right? Because note now that these student representative organizations don't empower people in the same way that, Malcolm X do, because these are not the individuals and these are not as empowering individuals. Let's say they are. The second question is whether student representative organizations are capable of breaking structural barriers. No, because again, this is just social ammo for people who already believe in their stuff and are unlikely to change. This just causes polarization. But the second thing is just narrative ideals take a long time to change. And I don't think government realizes how long that actually is, because it took a whole 70 years for the general idea that Black people are not slaves to change. if societal narrative takes so long to change under their principle, that I don't think it is justified to harm their safety. I think thirdly, it's just on engagement. And I want to leave the panel with a list of things that they didn't respond to. Illegality, government incentive for power, university incentive to appeal to government and society, university contract over student incentive, controversial nature of political issues, trade-off for coercion, the whole argument premise, and the principle harm and coercion that they never trade at all. Yeah, I think that's more than enough. Unless you're coerced, blink twice, otherwise, side with all.
All right, thank you. I now invite the proposition reply speaker to close out the debate.
Is it time for Gov reply?
Yes.
Give me a minute. Speech in 3, 2, 1. Op has been rejecting our main counterfactual throughout the debate. So firstly, what is the purpose of university agreement or our counterfactual in the first place? The only reason why we wanted to have a university agreement in the first place is to create a safety net for student protesters to not face direct repercussions from university. The question of the debate then comes to, will university disagreeing with our counterfactual affect our students' representative protesting? We tell you no, it won't affect the students protesting at the end of the day, regardless of whatever that there's of the house tried to neglect. Even without university agreement, we tell you that our case can still stand. The fact that we still support individuals trying to protest, the fact that we still have our youth voices, we still have youth voice out in society. University disagreeing will only not will only create will only create the students to not have a safety net, which we think is not really harmful for protesters. Secondly, will university environment would be deteriorated if we were to support with this motion? One, we tell you that we're not forcing each and every single individual and student to opt into these protests and stances. They can just mind their own business, not joining the stances at the end of the day. We tell you that all of their arguments and harms about we supporting this motion about university environment will be deteriorated is fully taken down. We only support and give incentives towards students who wants to protest to voice out their opinion that opposition is trying to neglect in society. We tell you that if you don't want to voice out your own opinion, that if you don't really want to join those protests, then do your own business and study and whatnot. We're not really harming other students in that sense itself. Third, is students getting prosecuted harmful? Because that's the only thing that the House of the House has pushed through us throughout the whole debate, that students are going to get prosecuted under House of the House and we need to defend it. Insofar as I'm able to prove to you why students getting prosecuted is actually beneficial, we tell you that we win this debate. Because here's the flip. We tell you is that if the students who gets prosecuted and get jail time, we tell you that after that sort of 5 years of jail time, the student who gets prosecuted value will increase. This exists in politicians like Adam Adli and whatnot. We tell you that at the very worst case scenario, when the students' value increase, we tell you that this encourage more and more youths to voice out their opinion, because at least they have a representative who have actually been through it, because the fact that society would actually respect that specific individual because they are willing to protest and voice out their opinions regardless if it against social norms, regardless if it against governmental issues. We tell you at the very worst case scenario, youths under our side of the house is willing to voice out their opinion because of the fact that their value is increasing. That's the only thing that the side of the house that's the thing that the side of the house cannot get. Thirdly, let's just abide with their definition on political issues on conservatives and liberals. Is having two-faced conservatives and liberals under one university harmful for our side of the house? Let's abide with their world of political issues where conservatives and there's only conservatives and liberal only.
We tell you that the majority of university students are liberal because conservative views always relate to tradition and religion, of which university students don't abide so much. But let's take them at their best. We still tell you, at the very least, if there's 50-50 ratio of conservatives and liberal under one university, at the very least, our side of the house is able to create discussions to happen. Because you have to understand that discussions is important in order for us to have a progressive society, especially discussions coming from the youth. The fact that their side of the house is neglecting youth completely deteriorates that case. Now, lastly, will our claim that youth in society is acceptable actually happens? OP is making a lot of contradictions here. They say that there are lots of social movements that users use to garner attention. We tell you that number one, social movements that users use for attention and only people actually view them for sympathetic values. We tell you that people don't view youth just because of the opinion that the youth have themselves. That's why we wanted to support this motion in the first place. It's because we wanted to implement it's because we wanted to remove the stigmatization that youth is not important in society. The fact that their side of the house cannot really claim that this is important just shows where our side of the house is able to win. Every single harm that their side of the house has talked about is over-exaggerated. Please panels, side with side of proposition.
All right, thank you. That comes to the end of the debate. So well done to both teams, and the results will be out soon.
Thanks everyone for the debate, and